Hi everybody, today we're going to talk about two poems, Mother to Son by Langston Hughes and Southbound on the Freeway by Mae Swenson. Depending on when you're watching this video, the goal for this assignment is to take Mother to Son and compare it to Taught Me Purple, or take Southbound on the Freeway and compare it to The City Is So Big. You can always compare and contrast any two poems, but these are chosen together for a reason, so you want to be looking at how they're structured similarly, the storytelling in them, whatever it might be, but also how they're different as well. Try your best to compare and contrast these poems, not only in what they say and what they mean, but also their structure, their use of positive, negative words, whatever it might be. This video is just going to kind of talk about both poems, give you a general understanding of them in case you need some assistance. I'm not going to read these today for a very simple reason. For Mother to Son, it's a very famous poem. I'm going to put a link in the description of Viola Davis reading this poem and Langston Hughes himself reading this poem. And for Southbound on the Freeway, I found another video on YouTube of an animated story version of this poem that, while the tone might not be 100% how Mae Swenson wanted it, it's just a really good video and a way to kind of think about what's going on in the story. Both of these are narrative poems telling a story with the speaker, so we'll be looking at that as well. So, starting with Mother to Son, at this point you should pause and go and listen to these poems if you haven't done that already. But starting with Mother to Son, we'll notice this poem and Southbound on the Freeway are both free verse, meaning that they don't rhyme and that there is no normal pattern or rhythm to the lines. Like each line, for instance, one line is just literally the word bear, that's one syllable, whereas life for me ain't been no crystal stair is clearly more than one syllable. There's no pattern here. So that's part of this poem as well. This poem uses something called, for structure-wise, something called enjambment. And what enjambment means is that most lines just kind of keep going and into each other rather than having a period or an exclamation point or something stopping the line from going. You can notice that like lines 3 through let's go 3 through 6 here, 3 through 7 are all one big sentence, and likewise you can see this is all one big sentence. There's some shorter ones too, but there's these kind of repetitions. Notice all the ands at the start, showing how this poem is kind of structured, just saying that repeatedly not only have there been a repetition of problems, which by the way we can see here, so talking about, we'll talk about word choice in a second, but there's a repetition of problems in this person's life. And I apologize for my terrible handwriting, but also her, let's call it her solutions to those problems. She just keeps going here, and that's what we're looking for in this poem. So we'll talk about this in a second, but let's take back a step. So the narrative here in general, for Mother to Son, starts off with, "Well, son, I'll tell you." So this is a mother talking to a son. Speaker and the audience are really quick here. This is what's called an epistle, a letter to someone or a speaking to someone. The mother is a speaker talking to the son. We can actually gain a little bit more out of this as well. Based on the time period and our knowledge that Langston Hughes worked during the Harlem Renaissance and was supporting things like equality and rights and creating a strong community and characterization for the black community, we know that this mother is talking to her son, and they're both probably African American or black. And another reason we know that is because of the slang here, this kind of Southern black slang of the time. Words like, I'm just going to give you a little one, the eyes. That's not formal English. Eyes is here multiple times, syllables dropping, stuff like that. We can use that kind of to figure out the dialect of the person, and based on when the poem was written, we have a little extra detail. And I will point this out right now, it's also said in my notes, that although this poem is aimed at primarily a black community, black audience, anyone can get the message of this poem. So we're going to look at that too, but that'll be in a moment. So in this letter, the mother to the son, she basically tells her son that she's had this life that ain't been no crystal stair. Okay? Crystal stair would be a nice, beautiful staircase. Instead, going back to the problems, it has splinters, tacks, boards torn up, places where there's no carpet. Those are all negative kind of connotations for that. However, even though she's not had this crystal staircase, she wants to make sure that her son knows that she's been climbing and reaching landings and turning corners and just basically continuing on. And even though there has been places where it's dark and there's no light, she is essentially still climbing and she's still going. So her actions, her solutions to the problems are positive. The problems themselves are, well, problems, and they're negative. If you described a place as having no light, being dark, no carpet, board stuff, splinters, tacks, you wouldn't want to go there. You want the crystal staircase, the beautiful staircase. So what do we learn from this poem is the question. And once again, we have that enjambment. So by this use of and just listing all the problems and listing the solution and don't give up, don't fall, keep going, don't turn back. It's a very simple message about telling someone that no matter what problems you face, you should just keep going. You can get over it because the son is younger than mother, obviously, and the mother is still here. Life hasn't been a crystal staircase for her, but she's still going, she's still climbing. The son has to do the same. And so it's a very simple poem in that regard, that we don't want to fall, we want to keep going, and anyone can get that message. But Mother to Son is an interesting poem in the sense that there's no rhyme scheme, it's free verse poetry, but there's still that structure there, the ands, the enjambment, meaning that the lines just keep going. Once again, we can use the word choice, the connotations, and see that our positive words are the actions of the mother. Once again, the negative words are the problems she's overcome. And in the end, the thing that trumps the problems is those solutions, because at the end of the poem, the last few lines, we do have that element that she's still going. That's what we end with, not with the problem. So Mother to Son is about that. The question to you is, once again, if you are watching this for the assignment, is how does Mother to Son connect to Taught Me Purple? And if you've already read Taught Me Purple or watched the video, you're probably already thinking of a few things here. Now, Southbound on the Freeway is an interesting poem here. And sorry, I think Rory just probably got picked up on the mic. That's okay. But Southbound on the Freeway is an interesting poem, and you have to do a little bit of inferring here. When you look at the poem, the first hint you have that something's amiss is a tourist came in from Orbitville. Orbitville isn't really a town I've heard of, and the other part is that they parked in the air. And so when I'm paraphrasing this poem and asking myself, where would a tourist from Orbitville come from if they park in the air? There's a lot of inferring going on. I'd have to kind of explain things like, for this next line, I'm changing my color here, the creatures of this star, the creatures of this star are made of metal and glass. Through the transparent parts, you can see their guts. Their feet roll around on diagrams. They have 4 eyes. The 2 in back are red. I'm kind of jumping around here. You have to make an inference in this poem and paraphrase that this person, or this speaker, is talking about vehicles. But they're not talking about them in the way that we would. Vehicles are, they have 4 wheels, for instance. They're made of metal. They roll around on highways, whatever it might be. This poem, if we're going to paraphrase it, is the tourist that came in from Orbitville is probably, and I'm going to embarrass myself here with my drawing skills, but is probably an alien. Little terrible smiley face there. And that's where our speaker is, and they are coming in and looking down at the world that we live in, and we can infer, this is an unreliable narrator, by the way, we can infer that we're talking about cars, but this brand new tourist to our planet doesn't understand that. So we're going to look at these things and have to infer everything. Like I said, the thing we looked at earlier, the transparent parts are windows, right? I'm going to regret trying to write this. Their feet are round, as I said. Those are probably wheels. We talked about the measuring tape, dark with right lines. Those are roads. You can do this through the whole poem. I'm not going to do all of them. I will point out this, though, because I feel like some people will lose this one. This is an older poem. When we talk about a 5-eyed one with the red eye turning, and I'm not going to be able to draw this well, but you might be thinking about this, that it's one of those old-fashioned lights where the light kind of turned on the top of what is ultimately Most likely a police car. And the reason why we can infer this is, one, if you know what an old police car looks like, you could know that. But also, when it says, he must be special, the others respect him and go slow, that's our big hint that this is a police car. And, they hiss as they glide, there's the sound of the cars. But then we get to this end part, and this is the part we're really going to focus on. It says, those soft... I keep missing my highlighter, I apologize. Those soft shapes shadowy inside the hard bodies, are they their guts or their brains? This is an odd way to end a poem. We're ending the poem with a question mark. And now I'm missing my purple here, sorry. We're ending the poem with a question mark that is left to the audience. And so we have our speaker. We know they're an alien, clearly unfamiliar with Earth because they think the cars are the creatures, not the humans. But we'll get back to that. That's important. But to end with this last thought, those soft shapes shadowy inside, good alliteration there. Those soft shapes shadowy inside the hard bodies, are they their guts? Or are they their brains? This question here, if you're trying to compare Southbound on the Freeway to City is So Big, this is the question you want to focus on. And lucky for you, I'm going to give you a little bit of information here. First of all, going back to the structure here, we could look at the positive and negative words here, but what you're going to find out here, when you look at these words, is that the word choice overall, and why not, I have this silly pen here, but the word choice overall is going to be neutral. And I'm putting that in giant letters at the top, one, because I forgot to change the pen, but two, it's really important. I was going to circle it in the first place. This tourist, quote-unquote, isn't here to conquer Earth, isn't here necessarily to interact with the creatures here. The tourist is here because they're trying to figure out what's going on this planet. So there are some words, for instance, like respect and special, which would be debatably positive. It says he must be special. It could be the same idea with the word they glide versus hiss, maybe paused negative there. But remember, this tourist is observing. They're kind of like a scientist. So unlike Mother to Son and other poems where we have a lot of positive and negative words, you actually end up having mostly neutral words here because the scientist wouldn't be passing judgment one way or another on what they're observing. They're just telling you what they see. So we can't get a lot out of the word choice. It just kind of creates, and if you listen to the audio, you can hear it. It just creates the report for the fellow aliens to get. It really comes down to not necessarily the form. The form keeps it really just like a serious conversation and just kind of that free verse style of just here's what's going on. A repetition of observations. A lot of the lines, for instance, start with things like, with nouns like they or their feet, whatever it might be. But this last question that ends the poem, which I should have gotten back to a while ago, let's talk about that question. So if we're looking at this question, let me just clear off some space here. Get rid of my beautiful drawings. So if we're looking at this last question, we want to ask ourselves, what is the point? Why ask, are they the guts in their brains? Mother to Son, by the way, was really reliable. Mother giving her son advice, we can trust that. That was reliable. This speaker here, while they're just telling us what they see, is unreliable to us as an audience. The real audience is probably other aliens, but we as readers are able to figure out that you're talking about cars. So when we get this question, are they the guts or the brains? We know that the people inside the hard bodies, the soft things, the soft shapes are humans. Which is embarrassing that I did that. Let's try that again. The soft shapes are humans. Okay? And so we know that. We are the subject of the most important question in the poem. And so when it says, are they the guts or the brains? The guts and the brains are two very different things. The brain kind of makes the decision, right? Our brains kind of tell us what to do. We use them to think and make decisions. The guts, on the other hand, are other organs. Obviously, they're working, but they're kind of more, I don't really have a great word for this, but they're more passive. They do their job, and just the rest of us, the brain, and we make the decisions. The part that's interesting here is that the tourist is unsure, whereas everything else is a clear, distinct observation. They're not sure if the shapes that are shadowy inside, shadowy because that makes it hard to tell what they are. Are they the guts or are they the things controlling the vehicle? And there's an obvious answer to that. The guts, the humans, are ultimately the ones that are making the decisions. But if an outside observer, if our tourist comes in and they're not sure what's going on, and this is once again part of that city is so big element, if they're not sure what's going on, what does that say about the world that we live in? That if an alien were to come down into space, it's a very odd way to look at it, but a big similarity to City So Big is this unreliable narrator. If I go and look at this poem, and the speaker here can't tell who is in charge, there is this part of me that's going to wonder, what would another species think of if they came down and visited us? What is the first thing they're going to notice? And we have a bunch of highways, a bunch of vehicles. How much does technology, how much does cars actually run our lives? This is a great question right now during the stay in place, the social distancing. If we didn't have our computers, our cell phones, stuff like that, what would we be doing right now? A similar idea is here. If we're the humans, we're the brains, we control the cars, that's great, but if people don't notice that, all they notice is the cars, the technology, how much it's overrunning the location. It's a really interesting thought here about the way we live our lives, and that even though we know the answers, it does make us ask ourselves, do we want this freeway, this highway, and the cars in it to be the first impression that we give of our society? Has technology really taken over that much? That's kind of what this poem is getting at. It's a kind of fun poem in the sense that you have to think about and infer. Every line makes you think, oh, what are those? Are those wheels? Are those sirens? Are they cars? But the other part of it is to actually take this seriously and say, wow, I've never really thought about how many cars there are, how many highways there are, how much technology runs our lives. And this poem is another one of those examples of just an observation about the world around us. So that's really it. That's the whole thing for this. Remember your job, take Mother to Son, compare it to Taught Me Purple. Take Southbound on the Freeway, compare it to The City Is So Big. You're going to be asked to look at the paraphrases of these poems, the structures of these poems. You're going to be asked to look at the figurative language within these poems, if it exists, which it does. And then in general, make some inferences. How do the meanings or stories here, these both have stories, connect? How does the structure connect? How does anything connect in it? Show me what you can do, and that's really the game plan here. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And my apologies for a little bit of rambling and the frequent errors in this video, but have a nice day.